welcome to the Design Leaders podcast. Every day, I speak with candidates looking to grow in the world of design, development, and construction. I also speak with market leaders at the peak of their career who regularly talk about mentorship and helping the next generation of leaders in their own development. This podcast is for those people hoping to learn about what the next step in their career could potentially look like. Today, I'm here with Bob Clark, president of Baskervil. Bob spent 5 years in the US Airforce before spending 2 years with Jacobs and then moving to Baskerville in 1995. He became the COO in the late 90s and has been president of the firm since 2004. Bob, I really appreciate you joining me here today. Thank you for having me. Awesome. I usually start these podcasts all the same. I want to learn a little bit more about your background and yourself. So if you could, tell me about your background and how you got your initial start in design.
The initial start in design, well, again, I went to school as a mechanical engineer, BS in mechanical engineering from VMI. That was precipitated by my, I think, love as a small child of taking things apart, putting them back together, learning how things work. Always fascinated by how things work, how buildings went together. Worked on construction projects as a little kid. My older brother was a contractor. He would come by on Saturday mornings and give me the spiel. Hey, I'll buy you breakfast. And of course, when your big brother comes by to say he's going to buy you breakfast, what he didn't say was, and then you're going to crawl under a house and do something in some construction project he was working on because I was small and could fit. But great times, great experiences, and that fostered that design to know how things work and put things together. And again, that led to engineering school, that then led to the design career.
Interesting. So very much a family affair, that.
A bit of a family affair.
So what, besides obviously, crawling under crawl spaces, going for breakfast with your brother, what are some key milestones or experiences that have helped shape your career path?
Early in my career as a young Air Force officer, I was in a construction group in the military. So we were designing and constructing buildings. The amount of responsibility a young 22, 23-year-old person gets in that environment is pretty incredible. And so I had a fantastic commanding officer at that time in my career, and he gave us a ton of rope and let us really run. He kept we had guardrails and guidelines, but as a young officer, I had a $50 million construction program that really let me have the experience to work in all sorts of different facilities, from high security facilities to fitness centers, to office buildings, to maintenance hangars. We touched it all. And it was a fantastic experience as a young officer.
Interesting. And it kind of leads me naturally on to my next question, to discuss who some of the role models are that have had a significant impact on your career. It could be that commanding officer, it could be someone else. Who are some of those role models, Bob?
Well, I've been blessed in that respect to have several. Even the older brother, as I mentioned, in the contracting world was one. And of course, that one commanding officer I've had several commanding officers, but one stood out when I was, again, a young 20-something engineer in the design field. He was very dynamic, led from the front. He was not, he set a great example. And he was also one of those guys that early on, we'd go tour construction sites. We'd go visit different construction sites to see how the projects were going, for how our designs were being implemented, that type thing. And one of my early visits with him, we jumped out of his truck and then jumped into the dumpster, the construction dumpster. He wanted to see what we were throwing away and what the construction crews were discarding. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And this was, from my experience, he was green before green was a thing, really. I mean, I'm sure it was, environmental consciousness has always been a thing, but I had not been exposed to it like this. And it was very impactful for me for the future of going forward, for me, for sustainability and being conscious of what, again, can be recycled and what can't. That was my first real exposure. And I was dumpster diving with a full bird kernel. That just doesn't happen.
Definitely not anymore. We talk about the idea of sustainability, of energy modeling, and I can't imagine there's many other people nowadays jumping into dumpsters like that. So I imagine it's very different nowadays. Um, it's interesting. So one thing that I didn't touch on my last series, which I want to touch on this series, is challenges and lessons learned. So understanding the idea that people, even in your position at the peak of their career, will have faced challenges and kind of and come past those challenges. So what are some of the most significant challenges that you've faced in your career, Bob, and how you overcame those challenges?
So I think a lot of business leaders right now may have the same challenges. We may refer to the same two significant events, especially in the design world. The Great Recession of 9 and 10 were really hard. Funding was cut, projects were cut. People had to do staff reductions. We did staff reductions. That was a very, very difficult time, and it was a very slow recovery coming out of that. So it was, they got the name the Great Recession for a reason. And we all kind of, when it was said and done, and we're back on the solid footing, we were, of the mindset, wow, we will never go through anything that hard again. And then March of 2020 hit, the pandemic. And that made the Great Recession seem like a cakewalk, because that changed the whole dynamic. And of course, while the pandemic was happening, I had friends in the IT world who were having their best years ever. But those in the design and construction world, we were in a different position. And so we weathered that storm, I think, actually pretty well. We had slowdowns, especially in our hospitality group. That sector got hit the hardest, I think. But we had a diversity. We'd worked on this since the Great Recession, a diversity in our portfolio that helped us weather the pandemic a whole lot better than we otherwise would have if we had not diversified the portfolio. So, the lesson learned from the Great Recession was the diversification that we took on. But we did work through that. And again, it changed the whole working dynamic it's still evolving today. The whole hybrid, remote flexibility kind of thing is still very much a piece of today's world. And I think it's here to stay.
It's interesting because I don't think that's necessarily specific to industry, because I sat as a recruiter of design professionals. I sat and watched some of my colleagues who focus in tech have, arguably the greatest years of their career, whereas we had to similarly weather that storm. And then the 2023 year has obviously seen that bounce back to hopefully what is market normal. So I don't suppose that is just industry specific, but across industry as well. Bob, as CEO, you spoke there about kind of the hybrid situation we've got, diversification. What principles and strategies have been instrumental in driving growth, in driving growth and driving success at Baskervil?
So we take an approach that there's a book out there called Strength Finders. We use a bit of a hybrid approach on the Strength Finders. From the standpoint of a successful design firm, our opinion is you need 4 unique skill sets. You need that design person, that the blue sky, design anything with no inhibitions on how it's going to be built. Then you also need that technical person that can make sure that thing can stand up to, South Florida hurricane force winds or whatever the case may be, the technical expertise. You also need project management expertise. Someone keeping all the trains on schedule, scope, schedule, budget, production schedule, staffing allocations, that kind of thing. And then the 4th skill set is that relationship manager, client development, business development, rainmaking, whatever you will. Any one architect, engineer, interior designer in our firm is good at 2, maybe 3 of those skills. Rarely do you see someone good at all 4. Further, there's usually one of those skills that someone really likes to do more than the other. That's where their passion lies. If we can find where someone's passion is and let them do that, they will do it with a little more gusto, a little more effort, a little more enthusiasm, however you want to, phrase it. Now we still have things we have to do. I've yet to find anybody in our industry who likes doing timesheets. Timesheets are one of those things that just no one likes to do, and I don't think we'll ever change that. And we've even tried getting rid of timesheets, but that's a whole nother story. But the bottom line is we try and find that strength that you'd like to do. You'll work a little harder at it, and you'll be a little more engaged. And that, I think, has been a key to a lot of our success and growth is Not all architects like doing project management, but we have some who love doing project management. So let's put you where you like doing the job you're doing. And if we can find the right balance, and along those same lines, we've also made sure there's a path to the top in leadership. It's not just the rainmakers that go to the top. We have a path to the top through technical, through design, and through project management as well.
I think that last point there, especially for those that are listening, is pretty crucial, because often it might be portrayed that to make that step into leadership, the BD approach, the salesman or the salesperson approach is pretty crucial. And I think, possibly what stands you apart is the ability to make into leadership without necessarily going down that one route. So I think it's pretty important that people have heard that from yourself, Bob.
We think that's been really key to our growth, is because, again, there's a path here for someone that may not be good at that piece, but they're good at something else. There's a career path.
I think there may be an overlap with that response with the next question, but I'd be interested to know if there's anything else in your mind. What sets you guys apart as a firm from others in your industry, understanding that we may have just touched on that question there?
It's a little bit, but also I think it comes back to values. We have a culture here that we're very proud of. There's the old expression, every company has a culture. Is it the one you want? We strive for the culture we have. We work hard at it. It's morphed a little bit in the post-pandemic world, but the values haven't changed. We had these values in place of flexibility, trust, empathy, and transparency. They were in place long before the pandemic, but the pandemic really drove them home. The value of trust. We had people sitting at home in their living rooms, and flexibility, and then the transparency. We were very open about everything we were doing and how we were trying to do it, again, to give people the confidence that, hopefully, confidence in us as leadership, that we were doing the right things and taking the best steps we could through the circumstances. So all of those, those four values: trust, empathy, transparency, and flexibility, were key to us, and still are. And again, we talk about values here quite a bit. We strive for this. It drives all of our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And we tell our folks to check us on it. If you ever see us not living the values, say something. Let's talk about it.
And those values, Bob, is that a mainstay in how you've fostered, a culture of innovation, creativity, collaboration, whilst working in a post-COVID world where hybrid nature is far more common? Are those values where kind of you've driven that innovation and that collaboration?
Yeah, I like to think so, for sure. Again, between the flexibility and the trust and the transparency, we put everything out there. I tell folks, one of my things I like to do is meet with every new employee. Just a 20-minute, 30-minute, just get to know someone. It's all about relationships. The whole piece of the business we talk about a lot is relationships. And it's relationships with each other. It's relationships with vendors, with contractors, with our clients, with sub-consultants. The old adage, you can't know too many people sometimes. So build those relationships. And again, I think through those relationships, we also give people the confidence and the rope to try new things. Part of when I was a young designer in this firm, I'd go into the chairman's office and say, "Hey, Dave, what if we did this?" And he never, ever said no. His answer was always, "Well, what would that look like?" And so then I'd have to trot off and go do some homework and come back with a makeshift business plan on how it could actually work. I like to think we still have that same mindset. No new idea is rejected. Every new idea get met with well, what would that look like, and how would we do that? And if we're going to try it, let's try it fast. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, let's kill it. The old expression, fail fast, kill it, and move on. But let's give it a whirl, because that's where the innovation comes from. It's not always innovation from the top. It's innovation from the middle or the bottom. Mm-hmm. Some of the best ideas.
I do just want to touch on there. You mentioned that, as a more junior professional yourself, you often went to the chairman's office. And then you also mentioned there that, yourself, you try to meet each new employee. So I think that goes to show that over time, that culture has remained. And obviously for a firm of 200 odd people, for you to meet everyone. I think that speaks volumes to the culture. And for those listening, I think in any interview process for this sort of size firm, when you've got someone leading the firm that wants to meet every single person that's joining, that speaks volumes. And so I just want to highlight that piece as well. Thinking about moving forward now, goals and vision, to the extent that you can discuss, there might be areas that you might not be able to discuss, but what are the primary goals and aspirations for Baskerville in the coming years?
So we've grown quite a bit in the last decade. Again, the post-pandemic, we had some I think very productive planning sessions on how we were going to come out of the Great Recession. Sorry, how we were going to come out of the Great Recession and position ourselves better for the future. That went through, I mentioned before, market diversification with the project types, public and private sector. That's been a real intentionality of us to balance our portfolio more. We're not quite 50-50 yet, but we're striving for more 50-50 of private institutional type work. I think that's a huge asset from a stabilizing standpoint. The other thing we've talked a lot about is geographic diversity, taking the market expertise we have and leveraging it into other geographies. And thus we are now in 6 offices. So we're seeing good results from that. And then the goal, the ambition we've looked at is right now, I think on the, like a hospitality giants, where I think we're number 9 at the moment in the most recent ones that come out. But on the overall BDC list, I think we're number 57. And so we looked at that and go, what's it take to be the top 20 firm? What's a top 20 firm look like? How do we structure ourselves to be a top 20 firm in the future? And can we get there in the next 10 plus years? And so that's our goal, is to put ourselves in the position. And that's part of our planning this year, is to start modeling what we need to do year over year to put ourselves in that top 20 position, because the rationale is it's never growth for growth's sake. That's not it. It needs to be growth with a reason. And the reason we look at is the standpoint of what's growth do for our portfolio, what's growth do for our clients, what we can offer, and really what's growth do for our people from a professional development standpoint, so they can take on, fulfill their ambition to do bigger, larger, more complex work.
It's interesting. I use that BDC report, when doing my own business development and looking for clients to go and coordinate with and communicate with. I use that. It's a mainstay of my kind of internet tabs. In fact, if I change screens now, it's probably open on one of my tabs now. So I hope over the next couple of years, I see the Baskerville name there on the general top 20.
I hope so too.
Separate to Baskerville and more about the industry at large, how do you see the architecture and design industry changing and evolving, and how is Baskerville preparing for those changes?
So it seems like every conversation we have lately is about speed. Mm-hmm. How do we go faster? We are designing pretty complex projects with pretty quick now, it seems. And on every construction job, every construction project, it's, how do we spin the CA process around faster to make things go quicker? And I can't help but think along those lines, not more than to help but think, if we're seeing it, machine learning, AI is going to take a larger role. I don't think AI will ever replace, there's 2 things that AI can't do. I don't think AI has true creativity. AI and machine learning, it's copying things and, homogenizing them and whatnot very quickly, but it's not original work. It's pulling from out somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And relationships. AI can't build relationships. That's distinctly human traits. But AI can do some other things, and we're like, I think, many firms toying with AI and playing with it with respect to some upfront design concepts to see how far it can get things going before we put the human hand on it and go further with it. So I do think in some level, and plus it's not just the design standpoint. Big data, I call it big data. We're really striving towards ERP systems. With respect to small design firms, we can't necessarily afford the SAPs or the big giant enterprise resource systems. We don't have those resources to afford those, but we are leveraging our current systems pretty well. And so from those data systems we're using, we're also getting, again, it's speed and efficiency, and our mantra is, one piece of data in one location. The goal is to eliminate spreadsheets, eliminate Word documents, eliminate all these extra pieces of where data resides in multiple places, and have the data reside in one place, one time. And that really streamlines the process. And again, I think contributes to the speed. So to me, it all goes back to how do we get faster and more efficient, and carve out more time for design, because design time is getting shrunk. And that's not a good thing. So how do we actually tighten up elsewhere so that we can put the time into the creativity for the design?
I think that makes sense. A lot of my responses, or a lot of the responses I've received so far, involve AI and machine learning for kind of speeding up the processes where we can then focus more in the design, like you said there. And I think I couldn't agree more with you that, AI is a danger, if that's the right word, in replacing a lot of skill sets, but the creativity piece and the relationship building piece, it absolutely, doesn't have that yet, which as a recruiter, my job is all about building relationships, and a recruiter that has a podcast. I don't have a fear at the moment that AI will replace my design leaders podcast, but maybe down the road. Can you share, again, I'm sure, there are certain projects that you may not be able to discuss, but can you share any specific upcoming projects or initiatives that Baskerville and yourself are particularly excited about?
There's a lot. So some of the interesting things we're doing now, we're doing some interesting work now with memorials, our civic and cultural group. We've done a memorial at a local university, William and Mary, which is a very powerful memorial. We're working on one now at Wake Forest. Those are pretty cool. I mean, off the beaten path kind of projects that are really interesting. So yeah, there's a wide variety of work that we're extremely proud of.
Awesome. And I think, I'd be remiss not to also touch on you personally as well. We've done the kind of professional part, and I think, there will be people out there that want to learn a little bit about you personally. So outside of work, Bob, what hobbies, what interests do you have that contribute to your overall well-being, your creativity, and ultimately your work-life balance?
So the overall, I laugh because I have now a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. So for the last several years, that's been my not just hobby, that's been everything. So quite a great kids. Couldn't be more proud. They know I'm a building nerd, and so when we travel places and go places, I find great peace and joy in walking around looking at buildings. I could do that all day. And I think that love of building and design is fallen on my daughter. So she and I just last weekend were walking a city, and just with no place to be, and we spent about 4 hours walking an urban environment, just looking at buildings, and taking in the sights, and Christmas markets and that kind of thing. It was totally a joy. From a recreational standpoint, I'm a winter sports guy. I live in the wrong part of the country. Our winter sports season here is very short, but I do love snowboarding, and every chance I get in the winter, that's my joy. As far as the balance you mentioned, the post-pandemic, the world's different. I think I've talked with other friends about this. We used to use the commute in from home to work. This is pre-pandemic. We'd use the commute in to get the game face on and get ready for the day. And then we'd use the commute home to settle back down and, transition back to the home life. We don't have that anymore, because with the flexibility we have, work is work, and it happens at all hours now in a different kind of way, especially with some of our growth, and we're crossing so many time zones. So what we stress to our folks is use the flexibility, that value of flexibility. Use that flexibility to take a break in a day, to go for a walk, take your dog out, to the park, do something. Don't miss your kid's event at school. Go see that play at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't miss that. Use the flexibility to your benefit to keep that balance as the best suits, and every individual's got to find that themselves.
And that city that you and your daughter walked around and spent so long, just in case anyone is listening who happens to be near, where did you go, and what did you find so beautiful about that space?
We were in Brussels.
Brussels.
So she's doing study abroad for the semester, and we visited her for Thanksgiving. So she and I took a day trip, because you can do that there. Took a train ride to Brussels and walked the streets of Brussels for a Saturday afternoon, and it was very, very, very nice to do. Very special.
Interesting. And I imagine, Brussels being an older city, similar to Manchester, London, when you go there from the US, I imagine the architecture, the buildings are just completely different with old style. Interesting.
And of course, we also had to get the required Belgian waffle and Belgian chocolate.
Any soccer games over there at all, or not? Not.
No, I think we missed no football for us. Trip was too short.
Got you. I like how you refer to it as football there. I think we swapped. I said soccer and you said football. Well, Bob, that's all of my questions there. There will be, hopefully there are still people still listening now. And for those listening, where can they learn more about yourself, about Baskerville? Where could we direct them?
The quickest link is baskervil.com, baskervill.com. And then, of course, our social media channels, where you can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook.
Now, when we do share this podcast, I'm going to share, the Baskerville LinkedIn, the website, your profile as well. So I'd encourage those that are listening to go and connect with Bob. And I think, as we come to an end, Bob, I really appreciate you joining today. And I hope that those listening gained as much from it as I have. And thank you very much for today, Bob.